Hey there, welcome to today's episode, and as you can see we are diving in with the highly anticipated MPC Stems. I'm going to be using the MPC 1 Plus, but of course this works from anything from the Live to the XSE. Now currently it's only available in controller mode, so this is hooked up, it's linked to my iMac here, so we are essentially using the software to control it, but hopefully in the not too distant future we're going to see that available as a standalone thing as well. Now at this point you're not going to need me to tell you what stems are and MPC stem separation, so let's dive in and we'll take a look at it in real time. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to browse, because of course we're going to need a sample that we can play around with, and I've picked out this one called Natural High by Bloodstone, and I'll just play you a little bit of that. I'm hoping I don't get screwed over the copyright for using this, but I think it'll be just a really good example of something that we can play around with. Now the first thing I need to do of course is load it into the project. I've deselected any pads because I just want to load it into the sample pool. So I've now loaded that in. If I go into sample edit, we'll be able to see it here and we can see the waveform. Now this is just a portion of the full song. This is just a loop that I found that I really liked. So crop that down and that's what we've got here. The first thing you'll notice here at the top is we have this new button called Stems, so we can click that. And here we get the options for how we want to stem this thing out. So if you just want one of these elements, you can deselect the others. If you only want the vocals, for example, you can do that. But in this case, I want everything because I want to be able to see what this thing's capable of. So we're going to choose all 4 of these and then just click do it. Now, I haven't tried this. This is the first time I'm playing around with this since I've installed it. And I can see we've got some preparing output buffers here. I wanted to do this completely in real time so you can see how long it actually takes. Sometimes on the YouTube videos I've seen, they've kind of cropped this bit down. And it's not the speediest of process, but it's getting there. Maybe once you've done that once to get the software kind of initialized, it might be a little bit quicker moving on, but that's roughly how long it takes to do a relatively small loop. Now, I don't think it was awful, but you got to bear in mind if you were trying to do that over, say, an entire song, that's going to take a little bit of time to process and get these stems ready. Now that we've separated everything, we can see here labeled across the top, this one is other, so I'm assuming that's all the other instruments, so anything that isn't drums, vocals, or bass. And using the data wheel here, I can scroll through and take a look at each of the elements. So if we go to the top, what I like about it is that it seems to keep the original loop there if we need it. We've got our bass, got the drums, this other section, and then we got the vocals. This is going to be a quick preview of the original sample. And then if we go down here, this is the bass. It's pretty good. It's a little muffled, but considering it has to split this out from a full stereo file, I don't think that's too bad. Now, I was kind of curious how all of this technology would work, because when I've seen previous videos that Akai put out there, they're generally sponsored videos, so you don't know how much of it has been edited, or they've chosen specific samples because they know they're going to separate very well. I'm not affiliated with Akai, and this is my MPC that I bought and paid for, so this review is completely honest. You're seeing a sample here, chosen at random, and the effect that it has. And to be fair, I think that's actually pretty good. Let's scroll down and take a listen to something like the drums. Now drums I'm very interested in because I love drums, I love being able to hunt for drums, and the idea that we can strip them out of a full sample I think is very exciting. So let's see what these sound like. Have to say, I'm pretty impressed with that. They sound really clean. Now, before MPC Stems, I generally use RipX to do my sort of stem separation, and I think that is one of the best on the market. However, I do have to say, I think this is certainly comparable, if not a little bit cleaner. They sound really, really good considering how much other audio is in there, and it's stripped it right down to the drums. Let's scroll down and take a listen to other, so I'm guessing this is all the instruments. Little guitar there, we can hear the panning. Again, it's pretty clean. That string section is particularly clean. I think we can hear a tiny little bit of artifact in there. It generally sounds a little bit muffled in places, but where we have things like the strings here, that was really clean, so lots of usable stuff in here. The last thing, of course, is to take a quick listen to the vocal. I'm hoping it's done a good job of chopping that out.
Why do I keep my mind on you all the time, and I don't even know you?
Yeah, I would say that again was very good. So as a first impression, I do have to say I'm pretty impressed so far. The idea that we can strip all of this out now as a sort of sampling head is very, very exciting. I've always found sampling to be kind of limitless anyway with the amount of music that's out there, but the fact that you can pick and choose elements now is just kind of mind-blowing, really. So let's look at some of the other functions as well, because that's what I'm curious about here. If we go back up to say something like the drums, I'm assuming we have full control like we do normally over a sample. So let's say we wanted to take these drums here, and I want to make those into individual drum sounds so that I can play around with them. I want to chop out just a little piece of this loop. I don't need all of these drum sounds. I'm assuming I can come in and process like I normally do. So if we click create stems here, I want to discard everything that I don't want, and it lets us do that. The one thing I was curious about was whether if we chop something here, say the drums, does it chop the length of any of the other samples, which I'm assuming it doesn't, which is, yeah, it doesn't seem to have. I think that's really useful. So we've cropped the drums down a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to normalize these as well. So let's go to normalize, and we can just get a little bit more volume in there. Looking at the drums here at the waveform view, I can see that they're running right down the center of this mix, which is pretty handy for what we want to do. We don't need to bother panning them because they're pretty centralized. And the other thing I'll notice here is that the kick drums are a little bit quieter than the snares because of this particular recording. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into chop mode now, and I'm going to use threshold. And hopefully that is going to find the transients for us and give us a good starting point to just take some of these drum sounds. Yeah, sounds pretty good. What I'll probably do is just zoom right in here and just tweak the start and end points a little bit just to make sure we've got no unwanted noises in here. You can hear a little bit of the hi-hat kind of coming at the end of this one. So with the Q links here, I like to use the Q links, I can move my endpoint over a little bit. And now I can just run through and tweak all of my start and end points. A useful tip is to do shift and 0 snapping, and that way when you're moving your start and end points, it will jump to a 0 crossing point on the waveform, and that way you tend to not get the clicks and pops that you don't want. Okay, now that we've tidied up, we're going to do shift and convert, and we're going to convert these to a new drum program using slices. We're going to click do it. So now I can go to main and we can set this up as like a little bit of a beat sketch. I'll just create kind of like a new loop, something just quite short as a demonstration for this video. So my first sequence here, I'm just going to name that as loop. I'm going to set the BPM to something more appropriate. So let's say we'll do 80 something. Let's do 83. I'll keep it set at 2 bars. That's okay for now. And then on our first track here, this is going to be our drums. So I'm going to name this as drums. And then we need to find the correct program. So I'm going to scroll over and I can see Bloodstone Natural High Verse. And I know that's where the drum sounds are. So I'm going to rename this as drum samples. So we've now taken the drums from that sample and now we can create our own drum loop, something with a completely different flow. Before we do that, I just want to jump into program edit and change a couple of things here. Because we chopped those samples up, it's put them into a mute group, which I don't want. So we're going to go to poly here and change that from mono to poly. And if I want any of the sounds to kind of overlap and double up a little bit, I generally change all of my pads to poly mode as well. Now we can go back to our main page. I'm going to turn timing correction off here because I don't want any quantize when I record this. I want it to be kind of swinging and off the grid. And we can just try and record in a basic 2-bar loop. Okay, good enough to get us started. It's a little bit rough, and there's a couple of reasons for that, so let's sort those out. Now, we've got no quantization here, so I'm going to select my first kick drum. Just make sure that is nudged over here, and I have don't snap turned on, but I just want to make sure this is right at the beginning of the loop. I can see here there's a little bit of double triggering as well, so I'm going to delete that out. Now, what I really like about the idea of chopping up old breaks like that is that you get the different variations in sounds. So when you're programming in your drums again, we get the option to use a couple of different snare sounds. So we have this snare here. Sounds different to this one. And that can just add a lot of life into your beats. So we've now made a new pattern, a new groove out of the drums that we had there already. And we've obviously sped up the tempo. We're now working in the kind of 80 BPM range. And I've added my own sort of swing and drunken groove to it and created just a simple 2-bar loop that we can now put some chops over the top of. So let's dive back into sample edit. And this time I'm going to try and find the other section, which is here. Just going to zoom this back out a little bit. And over in trim mode here, let's take a listen to this. Now we got quite a lot of heavy panning here. This guitar is panned over to the left. I can hear that. The strings may be slightly more over to the right. So we have to decide whether we want to process this and make it more of like a mono sample. And of course on the MPC you can do that using the process menu. However, I think I'm going to leave the panning in there for now because we can always process it later on. So the only processing I want to do here really is going to process and I want to normalize this just to make sure, again, we've got like a decent bit of volume. So now this stem has been normalized. And if I jump over into chop mode, we can just begin to put some chops in here, and I'll do that manually. Okay, got a few chops going. Just come in and tweak the start and end points again just to make sure everything's nice and tidy. Okay, all sounding pretty good, and we don't have any unwanted clicks and pops in there. So again, we're going to do Shift to convert, set this to a new drum program and click do it. Then we can go back to our main page here, create a new track, which is going to be for our sample chops. So we're going to call this chops. And then we're going to find the new program that we need, which should be this one. And to keep the project nice and tidy, let's rename this as sample chops. And we've now got our first 2 tracks made. So from here, all we need to do is now layer our sample chops over the top of our drums. And just before we do that, I'm going to go into Program Edit. And while I'm in here using my Q link here at the top, I can change the global pitch of all these samples. So if I want to try a different pitch, I can do that. And I kind of like -3 semitones, so I'm going to set mine there. And hopefully what we can do now is just record in some kind of loop over the top of our drums using these chops. Now, as long as I've got a rough idea for where I want the chops to fall into place, I don't really care if they fit perfectly well at first. I just want to get them in place and get the loop right, and then we can shift things around a little bit. The other thing I want to do with my sequence is I want to convert it and double the length, just so that I've got 4 bars to play with now. Okay, far from perfect, but we can tidy that up and start moving things around just to get the flow of it a little bit better. Again, you can see I'm using no quantization when I'm recording these in because I just want to get it with the right rhythm and the right feel. And the quantization tends to snap things where I don't want it. But I do need to play around with some of the slices here with the timing to get it to fit to the beat a little bit better. I'm going to start by shifting this first slice over, making sure it's right at the beginning of the beat. I think this one here wants to be moved back a little bit just for the timing of it. And here's one of the first problems I have is on this pad here. You can hear that it's got like a little bit of a rhythm and a timing to it. Doesn't quite fit with the beat, so we've got a couple of choices here. We can slide the sample around a little bit to just try and pull it into line. And let's not forget, we can always go back into Program Edit and play around with the sample start and end point as well. Now, my initial thought here is that the timing of it is a little bit slow, like it needs to be kind of before the beat a little bit. So we're going to slide it back a touch and see if that makes any difference to it. And I still think it needs to go a little bit further. It sounds a little bit better, but it's not quite there. So if we go into Program Edit, we can go into Samples and we can take a look at this pad and we can zoom in. And what I'm going to try and do is pull the sample start over a little bit somewhere so we can see if we can get it to play a little bit quicker. Okay, so that fixes the problem for that slice. Now the other one is the sort of guitar riff that we've got here somewhere. That also needs to be tweaked a little bit. It's also clipping out because we haven't left any headroom in here, but we'll sort that in a second. Let's just try and get the timing of the sample right first. So we're just going to scroll along and find that particular slice. And we need to do exactly the same thing again. We either need to shift the timing or play around with the sample start just to get the rhythm of it to fit with the beat a little bit better. Now back in Program Edit, with this particular slice, I think what I want to do is just actually extend the tail of this out a little bit because it seems to cut off a little bit shorter than what I want. I also found that just by sort of lengthening the sample a little bit at the beginning as well, just helps to just push that into the right pocket kind of where I want it. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a little bit of clipping here because we haven't left any headroom. So I'm just going to come in and drop most of my levels a touch just so that we can avoid any harsh clipping going on in here. Now, while we're inside of Program Edit, we can also adjust the individual volume for each slice. And I've just kind of evened them out a little bit just to make sure that my chopped loop sounds nice. It doesn't have any big harsh rises in volume. So we've used the original drums, chopped those up, made a new break with it. We've also taken the original kind of melodic sample, chopped that up as well, rearranged it, pitched it, and just done something completely unique with it. Now I want to use the other elements as well. So we're going to add a new track in here. And this time I'm going to call this bass because that's what we're going to use. And we need to scoop back over into sample edit and then find the bass track. And I'll just zoom this out a little bit. Now, like the drums, I don't need all of this. So what I'm going to do is just crop this down so that I've got a few bass notes here at the beginning to play with. And we'll see if we can do something with that. So we're going to go into process and we're going to go to discard and truncate that sample down. So I'm going to go into chop, of course, chop this up manually. Something like that should do. And like before, I'm just going to tweak my start and end points. And once again, shift and convert. And choose a new drum program using slices. Back to our main page here. We're now going to find the right program, which is going to be this Bloodstone again. And we'll label this as bass sample. And what's really fun is that because we're using exactly the same sample, we've just made it into individual pieces. When I go into program edit, if I go to my global settings here, I can pitch this down by exactly the same amount, so by 3 semitones, and it should match the original melodic sample in terms of the key and pitch. And then of course, we just need to try and work out a new bass line to go with what we've already got. And that kind of fits pretty well. If we just solo that for a second, we can take a listen. I think that'll be good enough for this example. So the only thing that we haven't used so far is the vocals. So if we go back into sample edit, we can do exactly the same process again. Let's try and find the vocal section, which is here. And while we're in chop mode, I will start chopping this up manually.
Why do I keep my mind on you all the time? And I don't even know you.
Okay, those are the slices that I want. Shift and convert as always, new drum program, and back to main. We'll add a final track here, which is going to be our vocal. And select the right program again, and rename this one as vocal sample. And now we can add that into the mix. Now with program edit, we can do exactly the same thing again. We know that we've pitched this all down by -3 semitones. So we could do that here just to see what happens to the vocal. And maybe there's something there that'll work. But what I think I'm going to do here as well is I'm actually going to go back to main and I'm going to create another track here. I'm going to call this vocal 2. And the reason I want to do this is because I want to have 2 versions of this, because sometimes maybe I want to layer some of the down pitch vocals, but maybe I want to try pitching them up as well and seeing what happens if we layer that. Now what I want to do with my drum program here is I just want to make a duplicate copy of that we can play around with a different pitch. So I'm going to go in here and just do duplicate. Now we can play with individual pitches inside of one drum program, but if I've got 2 of these here, it just gives me a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more freedom. So I'm going to go back to my vocal 1 track. And we'll start with these that are pitched down by 3 semitones. I think for these samples here, I just want to use little snippets of the vocal, but I think putting a delay in might be kind of cool. And I'm going to try this diff delay. Let's select that one. So we get that nice effect. I'm going to take the mix down a little bit. And I think I'm going to change the timing to just straight 1/8 notes. I'm going to also jump back into program edit. We're going to go to the samples themselves on this pad here. I think I just want to play around with the start and end point here. I think I just want that. Okay, let's record those in. Now I deliberately left some space in between those vocals so that we can try playing around with maybe some higher pitch vocals as well. It's still pitched down to -3 because we just made a duplicate before, but we can see if we can find a pitch that works higher up the range. And I don't even know, 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 and I don't even know. And I can see that +9 semitones is going to work. That's going to pitch that back in, but we're going to get that kind of Mickey Mouse sort of vocal feel. Maybe there's something that we can just add in there. So again, I'm going to put an effect onto this particular slice, and I think we'll try something else here, maybe just a typical delay. Here's something like that just to get us started. And if we just quickly drop back into program edit again, I think actually what I want is just the end part of this phrase. Just from like know you, I think. Okay, so let's record that in as well. And just like that, taking one sample, one loop, we've split those elements using the stems, completely rearranged them, and just made an entirely new composition at a completely new BPM. I didn't need to come in and add any other drums or add anything like that. We just used the entire sample, sliced it back up, and completely rearranged it. And I think that's the absolute beauty of stems. I think it just opens up a whole world of creativity here. Now, what I've done here, just for the end of the video, is I've loaded up the original loop into a new program, and alongside that, I've put the loop that we created just so that we can do a side-by-side comparison of how we began and how we ended up. So let's take a quick listen here. This is the original sample. So as you can hear, quite a difference. Now, the final product here could use some spit and polish. This was obviously just a little beat sketch here. We threw a few effects on just to kind of jazz it up for the episode. But ideally, if you mixed and mastered that properly, you could get a really nice sound out of that. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's made you as excited about MPC Stems as I am. Props to Akai for putting out a good product. It was only tainted slightly by the install experience, but other than that, it was well worth the wait. So I hope you enjoy it. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next episode.